Say it with me, ladies and gentlemen. Sir Henry Mother Fucker! Oh my yes! We finally have a chance to talk about this gorgeous Irish bastard from the No More Heroes series, and I could not be happier too. Henry was just some guy who showed up randomly when you went to face the 5th ranked fighter in the UAA, Let's Shake, and just sliced him in half after a cock-teased cutscene of how awesome the fight was going to be, then flaunts his awesomeness and mysteriousness, then just vanishes, never mentioned again. It's only after you become number 1 after having an emotional fight with your former lover and half-sister Jean, and almost getting the biggest disrespect by being murdered with your pants down, that he hops in to save you, only so the two of you can head outside and duke it out like men. This final battle can be entirely missed if you don't fully upgrade your katana, and is absolutely one for the ages, and is one us in the Canada community know inside and out. But let's go over it anyway. In a nutshell, this battle is 2 beam katana masters going head to head against one another in a motel parking lot with a kick-ass and absurdly awesome piece of battle music, including an amazingly long and powerful guitar solo playing out loud in the background. What is this, an anime? Honestly, yeah, but I love this fight like almost everyone our conglomerate does, and it stands for a couple reasons. I guess for one, it's a very traditional concept of a final battle, one that I always love to see. 2 equals in talent and strength, squaring off against each other in one-on-one combat. Winner takes all. This rival concept itself always resonates really well with me, and this is one of the finest portrayals of that as well. Although, I wouldn't exactly say the fight itself is equal. For one, this fight is ludicrously fast. Henry's combos and dazzling attacks outrank literally every other fight in the game, even more so than Dr. Beast, Harvey, and even Jean. If you're not good with your blocks and dodges, you can easily get flattened by his insane combos, as well as projectile plasma arms he can launch from his katana, and his ultimate move that can one-hit kill you in a splendid fashion if you're slow enough to get hit by it.
Get wrecked, scrub.
Mr. Sir Henry Motherfucker is still a fantastic boss battle even after years of his hype, and definitely is my pick for the coolest Irishman in game. Oh, also, did I forget to mention that he is Travis's twin brother, as well as Sylvia's, the girl Travis has been trying to bang the whole game's, husband? Yeah, the game kinda throws that in as well after the fight's already over. Ah well, Suda51 will do whatever the hell they please. If you guys would like to know a little behind the scenes trivia from my channel, a couple years back I actually made a list of and completely finished the script of a countdown on Icarus Uprising bosses that I decided to give up on when I got to editing since I lost all drive towards the project. That mixed with the fact that I was probably stealing the idea. I only bring this up because it was obvious what number 1 on that list was. The Lord of the Underworld, the magnificent bastard himself, Hades. I will forever say how much I love this character. From his cavalcade of great lines to his sarcastic and literally trolling personality, his delicious sounding voice that I wish I could imitate when out on the town, and just... Hades is just so lovable! And given how amazingly awesome this guy is, the fight with him has to live up to that. Now, while I loved this fight when I first played it and still love it today, in retrospect, there isn't actually a lot of gameplay to the boss fight. Like the flight sections of Uprising, the pace and flow of the battle is entirely set on rails. Every attack and every movement of the fight tied very much to the pattern dictated by the game, not by your own design. And while I guess that makes the fight in terms of gameplay not that great since there actually isn't much, while the fight is scripted, just look at this shit. How can this not be enjoyable? I mean, you're fighting the Greek Lord of the Underworld as an angel in a frickin' mech suit. Only video games can make this work. You go through multiple phases of the fight, Hades' style of attacks and strategies changing as it progresses, just as your mech suit changes forms to give you new battling and maneuverability capabilities, all of which feature kick-ass visual effects and just absurdly crazy moves and attacks from both sides, involving stuff like face guns out of Hades' backs, his spiffing devastation ensemble, Hades' motherfucking drill nipple, and even slicing the whole bastard in half, with a pun to round it off.
You're not half the villain you thought you were!
Speaking of which, what makes this fight awesome is that with the gameplay on a set track, the dialogue and banter between both Hades and Pit, as well as Palutena and Viridi, is perfectly in tune to the flow of the battle. All the awesome lines and quips from both sides adding so much more enjoyment to this already awesome fight. Whether it be the threatening and battle-prone remarks to the same stupid Uprising quips that I adore so much, this fight is worth replaying just for these conversations. Couple all of this with an amazing underlying musical score and a finisher to rival the likes of Dragon Ball Z, and you get an absolutely amazing final battle. Too bad Hades is dead now. No, seriously, post-credit scene confirms it. But even in death, he likes to troll.
Which is why I'm here to delete your save data. 1, 2, 3...
Did I get you? No? Oh, okay. Since the number 2 of my favorite Pokemon battles list was on my regular boss battles list, it's fairly obvious that my number 1 is right here on this list. Once more, it's time for me to talk about my favorite final conflict in any Pokemon game, the conclusion of Pokemon Black and White in the Castle of Team Plasma. Some may not consider just the battle with the king of Team Plasma, N, as the final boss, and I in a way count him as part of the final set of battles that concludes this game's main story. I have said this before, and I'll frankly say it again. To me, the battle with N is the perfect Pokemon battle. Not only is this fight built up over most of the game's narrative against an opponent who has nothing but respect towards you, viewing you as his only equal in terms of conviction and belief in your cause, but also fights you mascot legendary on mascot legendary, something that has never been done in a story battle in the entire series. The fight is immensely tense and atmospheric, with my favorite battle theme in all of Pokemon playing the entire duration of the fight, and utilizing a mix of types of Pokemon and battle techniques, with the main aspect being a concept of fairness. From both of you wielding legendary dragons down to his lack of bullshit in his fighting style, this entire match is a match of equals, making everything so utterly amazing from my perspective. Coupled on top of that, with a knowledge of what is at risk in this final battle and the determination felt both by N and yourself, makes this easily my favorite battle in the Pokemon series. Of course, there is another half to this final conflict. After defeating N, the true mastermind of Team Plasma, Getsis, reveals his true intentions, unveiling that his goals are the polar opposite of N's. While N may have done some questionable shit to achieve his goals, his intentions were overall good. Getsis, on the other hand, is nothing but pure, unrestrained evil, using Team Plasma to leave the world helpless against his true goal of conquering the world. And this overpowering malice translates right into the battle. Accompanied by one of the most jarring and overpowering pieces of music in Pokemon history, Getsis tries to utterly flatten you with nothing but sheer unrestrained power. Seeing as he's packing the likes of a Cofagrigus, a Bouffalant, an Electros, and even an underleveled Hydreigon, this fight can really take its toll if you're unprepared. Sure, Getsis may not be my favorite Pokemon battle, hell, it's actually a touch unfair, but I think what it does is give the perfect blend to go with the battle with N. A battle against an honorable man with a drive and ambition who fights fairly and as equals, and a battle against his conniving adoptive father who raised him purely as a tool of conquest, who fights you viciously and attempts to squash you like a bug. Together, the best conclusion I've ever experienced in a Pokemon game. Despite The Legend of Zelda being my favorite video game series ever, the final boss fights typically find a way to be kind of underwhelming. I mean, the most beloved fight in the series is Ocarina of Time's final battle, but I find it kinda hard to take it seriously when the easiest way to beat him is to constantly get close to his taint. If I'm picking my favorite final battle from the Zelda series, I'm afraid it has to be the first one I ever faced. Yep, it's the final battle of motherfucking Twilight Princess. You know, the one where the final phase of Ganondorf does like only quarter heart damage, and his greatest weakness is a fishing hook! King of Evil, thwarted by a shiny metal hook on a stick! Alright, sure. This battle may not be looked upon as highly as other final boss fights such as, of course, Ocarina of Time's Majora's Mask or Wind Waker's, and I am most likely biased seeing as this is the final boss of my favorite game of all time, but I still feel that this is an awesome and underrated final battle in the Zelda series. While he's not as good as Zant, the previous boss in the game, is because you can't even compare to that. But you have to understand this from my perspective. At the time I first played Twilight Princess, there weren't honestly that many games I could say I had beaten, at least compared to the games I had played. And since Twilight Princess was a game of first for me and had such a lasting impact on me, you can imagine that this battle was absolutely breathtaking when I first got to it. The dramatic build-up of the final level, the atmosphere as you enter the throne room, watching Ganondorf rise from the throne and monologue to me with his fierce and intimidating presence, holy fuck, I was invested. And then we had the fight. Not only does this have the most forms of any Zelda final boss except for Nightmare, but what I think is the most varied final boss battle in this series. Not only does every phase feel very much different to one another, from possessed Zelda to Ganon in his new and more feral beast form to the horseback battle and finally a one-on-one sword duel to the death, but it also manages to utilize the most out of Twilight Princess's mechanics. While the first part with Puppet Zelda is mostly made as a contrast to the darkness of Ganondorf and an excuse to utilize the now staple Dead Man's Volley, the beast form requires use of your inventory of items as well as your own beast form to counter it, the horse battle uses the improved horse riding mechanics to do battle, and, of course, the final phase is all about the sword. You use almost every ability you have in your arsenal to face off against the King of Evil, and it feels awesome as you do. On top of all this gameplay as well as atmosphere, tension and great compositions, so much plot occurs mid-battle. We find Zelda's soulless body imprisoned by Ganon, Minna returns the power Zelda gifted her to revive her, then selflessly sends Link and the princess to safety as she confronts Ganon head-on, only to die in the process. And while this final sword fight can be made incredibly easy with the fishing rod, it's still deeply rooted in my memory as something truly amazing. The stormy clouds, the isolation from your closest companions, the booming and echoing battle theme, and of course, the King of Evil and the hero of Twilight refraining from their greater abilities and magic to clash one-on-one, blade to blade. And when you overcome the final blade struggle and deal the final blow, the satisfaction is so strong. Ever since 2007, I have waited for a new Zelda game to give me a Ganon fight that'll impact me as much as this, and the one that came closest was Hyrule Warriors. One day, old friend. One day. So, we've talked about the final boss of my favorite game, and we still have 2 entries to go. My second favorite final boss fight that I've ever faced is one I've talked about before more than 4 years ago, and it's still outstanding. Tokoyami no Sumeragi. The Emperor of Everlasting Darkness himself, Yami. Who hasn't talked about this final boss fight? Since even before I started making countdowns, I've known from other lists that this boss fight is one of the absolute greatest, and I cannot help but wholeheartedly agree. This is a long and satisfying multi-phase boss fight dripped in symbolism and narrative with some fantastic music and presentation, so let's really get into it. After you literally have all of your abilities stripped from you right as the fight begins, making you weaker than you were at the start of the game, you begin taking on this gargantuan machine, slowly getting your powers back one by one and finding a method of using every single one of those powers to do battle with Yami. Even stuff like summoning the moon in the background, which summons the spirit of the warrior Nagi, who you use the power of the moon to enchant his sword to defeat Orochi to slice Yami's protective shell in half. Okay, that's pretty awesome. Yami takes on a multitude of forms throughout the fight, beginning with a mechanical sphere with a variety of weapons, a massive ball of fire, a giant slot machine, and even a 2-legged mechanized walker, all of which utilize different attacks and require different methods to beating him. And did I mention that the actual essence of the most evil being to ever exist is a fish in a jar? Sick symbolism, brah! After you get through all those forms, the battle appears to be over. Until Yami catches you off guard, destroys all the celestial brush gods, and prepares to finish you off once and for all in his final form, a lone crimson hand. Just when everything appears lost, the prayers and wishes of all the people you have helped and saved over your journey reach you, reviving the brush spirits and allowing you to achieve your true divine form. Exploiting Yami's crucial weakness to sunlight, Amaterasu's natural ability, you pierce through his dark powers and strength and overcome him, concluding this amazing battle. This in terms of gameplay is almost what I consider to be the perfect final battle. Not only is this fight long and incredibly satisfying with so many different forms and attacks to watch out for, simply the fact that every single power and ability you told and strive to acquire in your quest is utilized here. Sure, it's a common thing in final bosses to put the skills you've acquired to the test, but this fight requires you to make use of all of them. finding a way to use them either offensively or defensively to power through Yumi's assault and bring him to his knees. From Water Spout to Catwalk, Rejuvenation to Veil of Mist, Bloom to Power Slash, and even Cherry Bomb, and obviously Sunrise. Not a single power is missed out, and the inclusion of that really ties into the narrative element of the final battle. Despite having to enter without your trusted partner Isun, losing Wako before the fight even begins, and even when the going gets tough, you are never alone in this final battle. From the brush spirits to the people of the land calling out with support, you always have people fighting alongside you to confront the Emperor of Everlasting Darkness. You don't fight alone, as you have the strength of those who believe in you, giving you the drive and strength to succeed against all the odds. Tie this fantastic narrative structure and almost perfect gameplay up with a great deal of symbolism evident in Yami reflecting the dark desires and evil intentions of the human race, great visual aesthetics as some of the greatest video game compositions I've ever heard, and you've just created one of the greatest final battles ever. However, we still have one left. As you might have imagined, the number one spot goes to the final boss of a game that has easily become my favorite game that I've played this entire year, and easily now lies in my top 3 favorite games ever made: Xenoblade Chronicles. This is a game that manages to effortlessly continue upping the ante in terms of plot and adversity, beginning as a simple revenge quest, evolving into a rescue mission, and even growing to an attempt to stop an entire war. And for the final boss of this more than 60-hour narrative, it excels beautifully and fantastically. A being whose actions have caused uncountable amounts of pain and suffering on both sides of the game's central conflict. A being who's manipulated every action of your party's quest, years before the party was even formed, to lead to his rise to power. A being whose only desire is to have dominion over the passage of fate and the future, as well as all living beings on Bionis, for he is their creator.
Mine is the one true Monado, instrument of destruction and rebirth!
In my lifetime of playing video games, I have never fought a final boss that has had me so immersed, so driven, and has blown me away to a degree that this final battle against Zanza has provided. From his proper reveal as the antagonist after Shulk and Egala had agreed to cease fighting and strive for peace, he and his underlings inflict so much damage and so much pain onto the party and all the people you've helped. Beginning by killing Shulk, the main protagonist, taunting and humiliating the party for getting deceived for all this time, killing Egil and Maineth as they attempt to protect the world, destroying the entirety of Mechonis, forcing the High Antares to undergo painfully horrific transformations into Telethia, divine monsters set to exterminate all life, and overall, so many deaths and so much suffering just to achieve his goal of achieving control over the world. Literally, there's a straight hour of cutscenes and scripted gameplay sequences to illustrate everything you strive for in your adventure being turned to dust by his selfish ambitions. And after going through 2 dungeons, fighting all his underlings, all traitors to this world you're trying to protect, and descending to the heavens to confront him, you better believe I was ready to take this bastard down. Like how I feel about most Xenoblade boss battles, the actual boss fights in this game are only alright. So in terms of gameplay, a lot of the earlier bosses on this list are more interesting. But Zanza here still manages to give you one hell of a fight. Dual-wielding both divine blades of both Bionis and Mechonis, Zanza is not an easy target to take down. With the ability to conjure up guardians with similar dual-wielding properties to hamper you as you fight, buff many of his stats, and lay waste to you with devastatingly powerful attacks with his own personal selection of Monado Wars, and an immunity to many debuffs that you can potentially inflict on him, he can be an incredibly formidable opponent if you're not ready for it. And that's just his weaker first phase. In his second phase, he not only grows several times in size with a new, more powerful body, he can alter the arena around himself to give him buffs or summon more guardians, turns his auto attacks into ether-based attacks, unlike almost every other auto attack in the game, which cannot be avoided, and rip into you with even more powerful attacks that can inflict various debuffs on your party or just deal absurdly high amounts of damage. but the most impacting thing for gameplay in this fight is one crucial element. Just like how Yaldabaoth had this attack that directly targeted biomes instead of the party, altering the gravity and severity of the fight and reinforcing the narrative elements present in the fight, Zanza's abilities as the creator and dictator of the passage of fate as the wielder of both Monados, visions no longer occur automatically within a fight. Instead, a quick time event is required to be performed in order for a vision to occur, Shulk literally having to halt in his tracks and channel all his concentration to simply pierce through Zanza's control of the future. And that's just to view the future, not to react and respond to it. This fight utterly drips with so much atmosphere and so much tension, leaving not a single moment of this battle that does not have you on the edge of your seat. Accompanying this boss fight is one of the greatest final boss themes I've ever heard in my life, simply known as Zanza. The blend of electric guitar, gorgeous vocal chanting, tense violins, powerful organ and jazz piano creates such a dynamic piece of music. The mixture of ethereal sounds and chanting to bring out the divine nature of the creator, while the rock elements as well as the driving and forceful pace effortlessly tells the tale of going hand to hand with this divine being. These two phases are both amazingly beautiful in execution, but when the second phase reaches 20% of his maximum health, the true spectacle begins. With a flashy sword display and some inspiring words from Fiora and Shulk, Shulk releases the true power that is dwelt within him, which manifests itself into the third Monado, the physical manifestation of a god's power titled the True Monado, and engages Zanza one last time. With this new ultimate weapon and the incredibly powerful new piece of music titled the God-Slaying Sword driving you into this final charge, you begin absolutely destroying Zanza with this new strength, the most powerful being in the universe made worthless to the power of a mortal, one who he himself created. This battle is downright outstanding. There is not a single final battle I have ever faced that can live up to the emotions, the investment, and the utter amazement I experienced in this final conflict. I would expect nothing else from this utter masterpiece of a game. I'm the Speedster, and you guys should play the first game first if you get the chance. Looking at you, European and Australian viewers. See you all next time.